Allen Lund Company, 47 years young and a proud sponsor, wishes OOIDA all the best as you celebrate 50 years.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Scott Thompson.
Welcome to the program. Scott Thompson here. Thanks for tuning in. We've got a good mix for you today, starting with advice for those of you out there who are into customizing your rig. When you're looking at mod storage, is probably not the first thing you think of. But as Brian Martin of the Chrome Shop Mafia is going to tell us, storage for tools, dunnage, and more can be part of what makes a truck look great, and it's practical too. Always great to hear from Brian there. Then we'll get into more serious matters in our weekly regulatory roundup with Jay Grimes of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. He's got some thoughts on that newly formed task force that's dedicated to predatory lease purchase agreements, along with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg's recent appearance on Landline Now, and an upcoming comment period deadline on side underride guards. Important information there to keep you up to date on all the latest moves out of our nation's capital. Then we'll close things out by playing the What If game. More specifically, what would trucking look like if OOIDA had never existed? Jamie Jones and Ryan Witkowski of Landline Magazine will walk us through a dystopian alternate reality. But first, today's news. The fight against FMCSA's proposed speed limiter mandate is picking up a little steam in the U.S. House. The Transportation Subcommittee under the Appropriations Committee held a markup hearing on Wednesday for their annual spending bill. In it, there is a rider that would prohibit funding for FMCSA's attempts to advance a speed limiter rulemaking. The spending bill passed by voice vote, meaning it now heads to the full committee for consideration. If that rider survives the entire process, FMCSA's hands would be tied. This is separate from a bill introduced by U.S. Representative Josh Brecheen of Oklahoma, which has the same goal in mind. H.R. 3039 currently has 29 co-sponsors, the two most recent ones being Representative Clay Higgins of Louisiana and Representative Troy Nehls of Texas. For information on reaching out to your elected representatives in Congress to urge them to get on board, check out fightingfortruckers.com. A California bill seeking to ban fully autonomous trucks from roadways is on the move. California Senate Transportation Committee advanced Assembly Bill 316 on Wednesday. It now heads to the state Senate Appropriations Committee for consideration. The bill would require that autonomous vehicles weighing more than 10,000 pounds have a safety operator in the cab on California roadways. Supporters of the bill say there need to be more guardrails in place for fully autonomous trucks. Critics say it will stifle private business and contend that the autonomous trucks will actually make roads safer. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has an update on efforts to combat movers and brokers who defraud consumers. Earlier this year, the agency launched Operation Protect Your Move in response to the significant uptick in complaints of movers holding household goods hostage and extorting additional charges from consumers. FMCSA says a 3-week enforcement sweep across 16 states led to more than 100 investigations. Dozens of cases were documented, which the agency says may lead to some movers and brokers losing their operating authorities. FMCSA has also established the Household Goods State Enforcement Partnership Program, through which participating state agencies have access to FMCSA enforcement databases, free training on federal regulations and laws, and will participate with FMCSA on joint investigations to support increased enforcement actions. 11 state agencies have so far signed on, and FMCSA says 4 more are expected to join by the end of this summer. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has launched a campaign aimed at getting people to slow down. It's called Speeding Wrecks Lives, and it's underway through the end of July. NHTSA says the launch comes as new data show that while there has been a slight dip in overall road deaths over the past several months, speeding fatalities reached a 14-year high in 2021. The agency says speeding accounts for nearly 1/3 of all deaths on U.S. roadways. The campaign centers around television, radio, and social media ads. They're targeting drivers between the ages of 18 to 44, the group most likely to be involved in speeding-related deadly crashes. Maryland State Police are asking for help finding a Pennsylvania truck driver who's been missing for nearly a month. Troopers say 42-year-old Jason Pearson was last seen at midnight on June 13th near the Smithfield Food Distribution Center off Highway 40 in northeast Maryland. His truck was left behind along with his personal belongings, including cell phone, wallet, and credit cards. For more information and a picture of Pearson, check out the Maryland State Police Facebook page. The majority owner of TransService Logistics has announced the acquisition of Massachusetts-based Lilly Transportation. TransService says the companies will continue to operate as separate companies. Combined, they account for more than 1,700 drivers in a couple hundred locations throughout North America. Terms of the deal were not announced. Every year, OOIDA raises money to send care packages to military service members serving in combat zones, as well as the Veterans Community Project, or VCP. VCP in Kansas City is a veterans housing project with a mission to not let any veteran fall through the cracks. Every month, there is a commissary day. Recently, members of the Truckers for Troops Committee visited the Veterans Community Project to see where the fundraising dollars go to help veterans. Dylan Chevalier is the Veteran Engagement Manager for VCP. He says the money raised makes a huge difference.
So all the funds that we get from various agencies, such as yourself, go towards commissary days to restock the shelves, to replenish the miscellaneous items, the hygiene products, just everything that we need to give to veterans for the month.
The idea to do the commissary day came when Chevalier says they saw a need.
So, about a year ago, we came up with the concept of commissary because we saw a big need of that resource. Veterans were coming in, grabbing food boxes, and they were taking things out for a certain reason. And I started the question saying, well, why are you taking that out? Well, I found out they had peanut allergies. They couldn't chew due to, teeth issues or something like that. So I wanted that day where veterans can come in and get that freedom of choice, that independence of just shopping on what they want instead of us giving them what we think they want. So that's where we came up with the concept of commissary.
Frank Smith is a local veteran and former truck driver. He says the Veterans Community Project has helped him in more ways than one.
I have found not just food from the commissary, but I've got 2 counselors here, and one helped me find a job, and also she helped me with dealing with some anxiety and that kind of situation, and just trying to help me get back on my feet. And as I said, they've been there for me. They helped me get a lift for my scooter on my truck, and when I went to the VA and asked them about doing that, they told me as long as I got my legs and my arms, I don't need a lift. So, they just been there immensely. And I appreciate them because, they help feed so many of us and our families also. If you got family at home, the first thing they say is how many in the household. And they doing everything they can to help us out.
This year's Truckers for Troops campaign will run from November 6th through November 12th. And finally, more than 100 truck parking spaces have just opened up in 2 different parts of the U.S., thanks to 2 new Love's locations. The one in Wilcox, Arizona, off Interstate 10 in Cochise County includes 60 spots. The other in George County, Mississippi, off Highway 98, adds 42 truck parking spaces. And that's Landline Now News for today. As we mentioned before, our Truckers for Troops telethon is taking place this November, as it does every year. But you don't have to wait until the fall to give back. You can donate 365 days a year online. Just go to the OOIDA website and click the Truckers for Troops link in the menu. Since 2007, OOIDA members have raised over $500,000 to send packages to our troops overseas and veterans' causes here in the United States. Coming up next, Barry Spillman and Mark Reddick talk storage with Brian Martin of the Chrome Shop Mafia. Then we'll take a closer look at the newly launched Truck Leasing Task Force and imagine a world in which OOIDA never existed. Stick around. Landline Now is back right after this.
You trust PrePass for more bypasses? Now let PrePass help with tolls. PrePass toll service means lower cost, one invoice for all tolls, and fewer violations. Created by truckers for truckers. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Attention all truckers, Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I want to talk to you about those dreaded tax problems. I know you want to keep on trucking and not even think about them, but let's face it, they're not going away all on their own. You need professional help. I've been helping truckers put their tax problems in the rearview mirror for years. course, I can help you too. Call me now for a free consultation at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com. It's like I always say, keep your eyes on the road, I'll keep mine on the IRS. 888-557-4020.
Landline Now. Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Mark Reddick. It's time for another installment of Mafia Secrets, Advice from the Boss Man, with Brian Martin of Four State Trucks, home of the Chrome Shop Mafia. And once again, I'm here in Studio A with our producer and resident gearhead, Barry Spillman, and we are on the line with Brian Martin of the Chrome Shop Mafia. Brian, how you doing?
Hey guys, doing good over here in Joplin. What's going on up there in the city?
Nothing but sunshine and happiness.
I love it. We'll take more of it.
There you go. Well, our topic today is where are you going to put your stuff? Storage options. And this is a good practical topic, but there's a lot of potential there too, I would think, for shining things up as well.
Oh, yeah. That's probably an age-old topic of the decades because although the modern trucks, of 2018, 2020, 2022, they've got a lot more sleeper storage, especially that's a little more useful than some of the older trucks. But, in the 80s, we wanted better and more storage, and they gave us a little bit of it in the 90s. In the 90s, we wanted a little bit more storage. They eked it up a little bit in the 2000s, and here we are. But, man, whether it's inside the cabin sleeper or outside on the frame, toolboxes, frame boxes, under the trailer, toolboxes, you can never have enough space for storage, tools, spare parts, emergency equipment. The list goes on and on.
Well, you mentioned a couple of places where you can put toolboxes. Is that the complete list there, or there's some others?
Well, if you pull a dedicated trailer, if you own your trailer, probably the easiest and most easiest to overcome is just hang a couple of toolboxes underneath your trailer. They're lockable. Most of them are more or less weatherproof. I don't know if I've ever seen one that's 100% weatherproof 100% of the time, but they are pretty good about keeping moisture and the elements out of those toolboxes. So if you do pull your own trailer, you can't go wrong there. Like I said, they're secure. They got good locks on them. One thing that we find ourselves doing quite a bit in our fab shop is on those under trailer or the big rectangular, toolboxes that mount either on the side of the truck behind the fuel tank or under the trailer. We've been going in pretty frequently and making like certain shelves, dividers, where a guy may want to put some dunnage in this little compartment, but then he wants a vertical separator where he can put chains on the other side of the wall, so to speak. So we do customize a lot of aluminum storage boxes to where you get different cubbies or shelves to make it more user-friendly, neater. Things aren't just piled and thrown on top of each other and getting all tangled up and nasty, which just, aggravates you when you get in there to pull something out and it's tangled up with like 4 or 5 other items. So keep that in mind. Any metalworking shop or fab shop can certainly customize the interior of your trailer boxes, should that be something you want to do as an upgrade.
Well, I'm kind of curious when you're talking about toolboxes here, Brian. I always think of the old Sears thing, good, better, and best. There's the good thing that you can buy, something that's better, and then there's the best thing. As far as function, what is the good, better, and best here?
When I think of all the number one names in truck trailer toolboxes, they're all pretty doggone reputable. Now, some may last 10 years, some may be more designed to last 5 or 6 years, but there's really none of them out there that come to my mind, unless it's just a generic import with no brand on it, beware. But if it's got a sign on it and it's something you recognize, you swing the door open, the gauge of aluminum or stainless is heavy, 1/8 inch or thereabouts, you're probably going to have pretty good luck with it lasting probably the length of the time you're going to own that truck, because most people are keeping a truck, 4 to 7 years, and then, as a whole, not across the board, but as a whole, people are trading every 7 or 8 years and upgrading and usually trading that truck in. So it's probably going to be time for new toolboxes anyway. But the only thing I find on these trailer toolboxes, if you're just going with something 2 foot long, 3 foot long, even 4 foot long, you have pretty good luck hanging those just from the ends. So you hang a bracket down off the cross member of your trailer and bolt it through the end of the toolbox. If it's a really long box, like 4 foot or 5 foot long, I like to put some support the length of the toolbox underneath it, just to give that floor, if you will, some extra strength so it doesn't want to crack out in the corners or any kind of weld seams, especially if you're going to throw things like heavy tarps. Like, you got 2 lumber tarps in there, you're definitely going to want to get some support underneath that 5 foot long toolbox in the way of an extra bracket or a bracket kit, things like that. But as a rule, all your well-known names that you're going to recognize, those toolboxes are going to last 5 years plus.
I'm kind of curious about the opposite end of this, which is bad options. What are some things that you should avoid either using or doing or putting on your truck?
Well, if you can afford an aluminum or a stainless toolbox versus a black painted or black powder coated steel, it's certainly going to last many, many years longer before it starts rusting, the paint or the coating starts peeling off. I mean, let's face it, if you're running New York, Michigan, Ohio, North Dakota, there's some pretty aggressive anti-icing agents used on the roads, and it can really eat through those black boxes relatively quickly. And then the other thing, I kind of hit on it, but if you see a box with no name on it, you flip the lid open, it's really thin gauge, like I would say under an 1/8 inch, you're probably going to want to beware that it's a lower quality. There's a place for an economy toolbox. I don't know if it's under a trailer that's going to run 120,000 miles a year in all elements. It might be good for a trailer you're going to pull on the farm behind your 1 ton, 20, 30 times a year. But for an over-the-road trucker, you're probably going to want to try to save up a little longer, get a better quality box. Another thing is, if you open the lid, you grab one corner of the lid and kind of shake it, and the old lid kind of does that tin can, that wonky waving thing, and you don't see the rigidity and the durability like in a really rigid door. That's going to be a telltale sign there. But like I said, those are usually going to be your generic, purely imported, low-cost economy toolboxes. And those, I find, they're going to last 2 or 3 years, and you're going to be wishing you to went a different path.
Those cheaper ones, Brian, also don't seal well.
You're right. You're always going to have that thin coating of water or oily mix in the bottom of your toolbox.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just nasty. Turns everything black and slimy, and you can't seem to get away from it once you get that deal started. So to your point, that's going to be caused by a poor sealing door.
That's absolutely right. The heavier ones have a lip that's big enough to make an actual seal.
Yeah, and they're rigid enough to when you flip that T-handle, it kind of pulls that whole door in tight against that rubber seal, where the wonky ones just wing out on each corner, and it's only pulled in tight where the latch is. Yeah, so anyway, that's my opinion there. Moving up to the truck, which a lot of people, you pull your company's trailer, and you're under a different trailer every 2 or 3 days, so you're limited to that truck. There's some great options, in the step box or the saddle boxes to go behind your fuel tank, ahead of your rear fender, or even behind your fairing now. There's specialty toolboxes made there that you don't even really see, but it's a great place for battery cables, a chain, a tow strap, extra fuel filters, a certain amount of tools, safety equipment, triangles, safety triangles, things like that. And even up in the frame, where you would stand to hook up the hoses on the nose of your trailer, there's some great in-frame toolboxes from several manufacturers now, and all of these are secure and lockable, whether it's a T-handle with a key or just the old traditional hasp with a padlock. There's some neat stuff out there for guys that don't pull a dedicated trailer, and you're limited to all your storage has to be on or in your truck.
And we've mentioned mainly exterior storage here for the trailer and the truck. Earlier on, you had mentioned in the sleeper, what sort of spaces can you get in sleepers these days? And is there some way to kind of retrofit something additional in there?
Well, for the, I don't want to only talk to the Pete and Kenworth guys, but for now, Pete and Kenworth guys, Iowa Customs offers some great storage solutions, is what they call them. But basically, they're drawer cabinets. They might house 3 drawers and a microwave. They might house 2 drawers and a refrigerator. They've got them, to go on the left side of the sleeper behind the driver's seat. They got them to go on the right side in the passenger closet. But Iowa Customs really makes some handy, just like, I'm not going to say it's going to jump out of the cardboard box and right into your sleeper, but custom made for the Pete's and Kenworths, relatively quick and easy install times for those Pete and Kenworth applications.
So, talking here again about the things like the step box and the saddle box and all that, earlier on the trailer storage, we talked about what the bad options are. What are the bad options here? What things are you looking to avoid on the on-truck stuff?
Well, when you get past those Iowa Custom options, everything I've seen for the Freightliners, the Volvos, the Internationals, the Max, the Western Stars, is pretty much a retrofit, custom fabrication, metal shop, upholstery shop type endeavor. I'm not aware, and there's surely something out there that Brian Martin hasn't heard of, but I'm not aware of anything right off the shelf for any of those other models. We remember the old Cubby Buddy toolbox that fit in your luggage compartment, in the side door, under your sleeper. You access it from the exterior. There was some pretty cool tool, small parts, zip ties, electrical connectors, brass fittings, some pretty cool storage solutions for that. And we are bringing the Cubby Buddy back here at Four State Trucks. They kind of closed down their business, but now we're assisting them and starting it back up. So hopefully we'll have Cubby Buddies in stock here again in the late summer, early fall, and they're universal. They'll fit in the storage compartment on any sleeper. They're even pretty handy for different applications, outside the Class 8 truck. They're pretty handy for tabletop applications or in a storage cabinet in your shop, so to speak. So the Cubby Buddy was good for that luggage compartment, but all these other sleeper upgrades, if you're wanting additional shelves, dividers, things like that, I feel like you've got to hit a custom shop or a handyman and just kind of draw them a picture of what you want built, what your vision is, have them give you a price, and then see when they can get to it if the price meets your budget. So I'm always kind of amazed that there aren't more modular, off-the-shelf storage solutions for the inside of the sleepers of some of these other trucks, but I'm unaware of anything out there really right now that amounts to anything at all other than just, like an extra little padded vinyl-wrapped shelf, which is, really universal and has to be modified to fit about anything.
Okay, well, Brian, we're just about out of time here, so want to thank you for all the information on behalf of Barry Spillman and myself and everybody else out there listening, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah, guys, if you've got a vision that you want made for the inside of your sleeper or the interior of your truck, stop by and see the guys here, Cody, and them in our fab shop, and we'll be glad to try to make your vision a reality.
If you have questions for Brian Martin, you can email them to bossmanonlandlinenow@chromeshopmafia.com. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. More miles for every tire dollar, and more confidence in your fleet. At Firestone, we help fleets save with dependable value. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2023 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Welcome back to the show. Scott Thompson here in Studio A, joined now by Jay Grimes of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office for our weekly regulatory roundup, where we take a look at some of the moves happening in our nation's capital that could end up having an effect on you out on the road. Jay, thanks for stopping by.
Good to be with you.
So we had Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg on the program this week to talk about the recently launched truck leasing task force. I do want to ask you specific questions about what he said to us and what we talked about, but I do want to make sure our listeners know what this task force is all about. We've talked about it, but there may be people out there who aren't, following as closely. They are doing some important work here on an issue that trips up a lot of people out there, a lot of truckers, that being predatory lease purchase agreements. Walk us through what this task force is hoping to do here.
Yeah, right. And due to that problem with predatory truck leasing contracts, we were able to get Congress to enact a provision in the 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act to establish a task force to really look at these agreements and figure out some recommendations and policies that could really crack down on some of the companies and people that are involved with these schemes. And so Congress enacted a task force that at a minimum is going to examine common truck leasing arrangements, looking at the terms of these leasing agreements, looking at the existence of inequitable leasing agreements and some of the terms in the contracts, and looking at specific agreements available to owner-operators, available to port drivers, and really kind of overall the impact of these truck leasing agreements on net compensation of commercial motor vehicle drivers. So kind of a focus on these truck leasing contracts, but certainly some more broader issues at play. The task force had to have representatives from across the industry, including labor organizations, motor carriers that provide lease purchase agreements to owner-operators, consumer protection groups, some attorneys and legal representation, owner-operators within the trucking industries, and other businesses. So over the last year and a half or so, DOT took applicants for the task force, reviewed all those applications, put together this committee of 9 individuals from across the trucking and legal industries, and they had their kickoff meeting this week. And from OIDA's perspective, I think we're very optimistic and hopeful that this committee is going to hit the ground running and be able to provide some useful recommendations to FMCSA, Department of Labor, Department of Transportation, to first and foremost eliminate these inequitable and predatory truck leasing schemes, and also make some improvements to overall truck leasing agreements.
And one of the people on the panel there is Jim Jefferson of OID's Business Services Department. We have talked to him on the program before. They get calls a lot from people who have fallen into these, I call it a trap, because that's what it kind of feels like here. But this, as I said there, it really trips up a lot of people. And you get into a situation where you get in this lease purchase agreement and you really have no avenues to get out of it. And these people are being treated horribly, is a kind of a diplomatic way to put it here. Talk about some of the personal stories that you've heard and how this kind of plays out for people out there that do get tripped up in this and get in really bad situations.
Yeah, so kind of the common theme that we hear all the time here at OIDA, and some of the problems that Jim Jefferson really on a daily basis gets to work through, and that's why I'm so glad that he's going to be on the task force here, is these companies and carriers, they come at individuals who want to get into the trucking industry, and they kind of sell them on this false bill of goods that, you work for a year or two, you'll make your lease payments, and then you'll be able to get your own truck and start your own business. But they don't really concentrate on all the fine print, the monthly leasing payments that you're going to have, the control that you're going to be under by the carrier, and that creates so many unfair employment and economic situations for the individuals that get pulled into these schemes. And a lot of the times we hear that, in order to meet the monthly leasing agreement, a driver is going to have to do so many loads, drive so many miles, and the carrier knows this, and they know, since they're dispatching the driver, they're going to know when they're getting close to meeting those milestones. And we kind of see over and over again when the driver starts getting close to those, the carrier starts pulling back on their assignments,
Yeah.
and that leaves the driver with no leverage. We also see kind of from a driver training perspective, a lot of times carriers are using these lease purchase agreements to get out of training requirements to their employee drivers and not investing the time and resources to properly train entry-level drivers coming into the industry. So some of these cases, the individuals have little or no training, and that's certainly not going to put them on a path to success and being able to eventually own their own truck. So just kind of, it's really a case where these claims are too good to be true. Unfortunately, the individuals get taken advantage of. They don't know exactly what they're getting into when they sign on to the agreement, and very rarely does it work out in the driver's favor. And not only do we see drivers who can't meet the lease payments, they end up getting in debt, and certainly don't see these drivers staying in the industry year after year, building up safe and useful experience.
Yeah, one of the members of the panel, Paul Cullen Jr., an attorney, said essentially if there's a truck driver out there that does end up in that place that is promised to them kind of at the beginning, that they are somewhat of a unicorn these days, because it doesn't happen all that often. The hope here is that bringing this issue to light, out into the light, does bring about some positive changes. I do want to talk to you about our conversation with Transportation Secretary Buttigieg this week. And I said this yesterday, or when we talked to him, about it being refreshing that these issues, I think, are being put out there and being brought into the light. Broker transparency, Women of Trucking Advisory Board. There are a number of things that the DOT is doing here that are intended to improve retention, and by extension, improve safety on the roads. FMCSA Administrator Robin Hutchison mentioned that as well, too, during that task force meeting. I do wonder, too, and we talked about this as well, we've got these things that are happening that are positive and looking for positive resolutions with safety in mind. But then we've got things like speed limiters, AEB technology, possible to mandate there, that are coming out as well that kind of are going to inevitably probably push people out of the industry, right? So we've got kind of this balancing act we're doing here.
There's a little bit of a disconnect that we've seen, I think, over the last few years. And you mentioned the comments from Secretary Buttigieg and from Administrator Hutchison, and I think those are on point, and we do appreciate those comments, and we hear a lot at different, whether it's these task forces and advisory committees, or whether it's when they're appearing before Congress. I think we know that the leadership over at DOT understands the contributions and the sacrifices that the trucking workforce is making, and they've prioritized improving retention, improving the quality of trucking jobs, and they've kind of said all the right things, but we kind of have yet to see real substantive action be implemented. And I don't want to take away from, we have seen some investment in some truck parking grants that have come through from DOT, and certainly we have more on the way there in terms of congressional action. But when you look at some of these proposals that have been moved forward by DOT and FMCSA, it kind of flies right in the face of keeping those safe and experienced drivers on the road, especially on the small business side. The big one, certainly right now, that everyone is kind of worried about is this speed limit proposal. And, we've also heard DOT leadership talk about this national roadway safety strategy to improve highway safety, reduce traffic fatalities across all modes of transportation, including trucking. But in that national roadway safety strategy is an effort to advance a speed limiter rulemaking. And we're still kind of waiting to see how FMCSA and DOT move forward on that regard. We kind of saw it reopened last year, somewhat out of the blue and unexpectedly, with no direction from Congress or the industry widespread. Certainly there's some supporters that want to see a speed limiter mandate move forward. I think when you look at the public comments that were filed to that the supplementary advance notice of proposed rulemaking last year, the vast majority of the drivers, of the men and women behind the wheel, are against that, any mandate.
Very against, yeah.
And certainly we've seen a lot of support for congressional legislation that was introduced earlier this year, H.R. 3039, the DRIVE Act, that would prevent FMCSA from advancing a speed limiter mandate. So, it's great that these task forces and advisory committees are made up of drivers, made up of associations representing drivers, but we really would like to see DOT and FMCSA kind of reflect the driver perspective in some of their rulemaking processes, especially ones that haven't been mandated by Congress. Certain speed limiters falls right into that category. There's the unique electronic identifier is another one there too that I think a lot of drivers don't feel any need to. So it's good that they're saying the right things, and I know that they're really working hard to implement some of these principles when they talk about improving driver retention and the administration's kind of trucking workforce action plan. But I think there's a lot more they can do to advance some things that drivers want, and certainly there's some things they can push back on that drivers would also be very appreciative of.
In a perfect world, maybe. Get your comments ready for that speed limiter proposal, which FMCSA Administrator Robin Hutchison told us would come later this summer or early in the fall. In the meantime, get your pens or keyboards or whatever ready here. Comments on a side underride proposed mandate are still being accepted for about a week now, barring any kind of extension. Walk us through that.
Sort of. I don't think we're quite at a proposed mandate stage yet. But again, this goes back to that 2021 infrastructure bill that called on NHTSA to do some more research into side underride devices. And if the research proves that there could improve safety and would be beneficial to the industry, then NHTSA would kind of have to go through the rulemaking process. And earlier this year, NHTSA, they've kind of gone through some more initial research on these devices and equipment and put out their findings. And they also put out, I think, about 9 different questions for the public to comment on to kind of let NHTSA know which direction they should be moving in. But when you kind of look at some of the findings in the latest research, it still points to that the cost for installing this equipment far outweighs the safety benefits. And this is not a new issue that DOT or Congress has looked at. It kind of goes back decades, and NHTSA kind of has routinely found that the cost for a mandate exceed benefits. I think the latest research that they showed that the yearly cost of this mandate would be as much as $1.2 billion. Putting in perspective, and for motor carriers, that's about $3,000 to $4,000 on each trailer. And the initial research here doesn't even take into account a lot of operational and maintenance costs as well. So we are still in opposition to any mandate, hoping that NHTSA is not going to move forward. I think it'd be difficult for NHTSA to move forward on this mandate, considering some of the findings that they've shown, and certainly more study could be necessary as some of the equipment changes and some of the cost estimates can always fluctuate. But again, when you talk to the drivers and talking about getting over rail crossings, maneuvering in and out of loading facilities, these side underride guards do not get the safety benefits that would be necessary when you talk about a federal mandate for all trucks across the board.
July 20th is a deadline right now. Fightingfortruckers.com is the place to get those comments in. One-stop shop there to doing just that. Jay, a pleasure as always. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
That was Jay Grimes of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. Landline Now is back in just a moment.
For can't miss accuracy, weigh your truck on a CAT scale.
When you weigh on a CAT scale, you get a no excuses guarantee. You can now save time weighing by using your smartphone. Find out more at weightmytruck.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now, welcome back. As OOIDA celebrates its 50th anniversary, Landline magazine recently imagined a world in which they didn't. In fact, in this hypothetical world, OOIDA has never existed. So what would such a world look like? Staff writer Ryan Witkowski and managing editor Jamie Jones are here in Studio A to tell us. How we doing?
Hey, doing good.
I'm fantastic.
That's good. You look fantastic as well, Ryan.
Thank you.
Let's start with the concept for this piece, which is... Jamie, it goes without saying that you look fantastic as well.
Thank you. All right, let's get this back on track.
Yeah, there you go. So let's start with the concept for this, which people can find in the July issue of Landline magazine. It's kind of like, or maybe a lot like, It's a Wonderful Life.
Exactly.
Where did the idea come from?
Well, when we started prepping last year for the 50th anniversary, we had a big jam session and everybody got together, which was one of the first big meetings we'd had in a long time in person, after the so I think everybody was even more squirrely than normal. But
yeah, we were still getting acclimated to being around people.
Yeah, we were a little feral.
The social awkwardness.
Yeah, a little feral. Anyway, just throwing wild ideas out about what we could do, what the stories needed to be throughout the year, because we didn't want to just look back at the history of the association. And I don't remember exactly who said the words, but somebody said, well, what has OOIDA done for me? Which is almost an insult for us who are here at HQ, because you see all the work and everything that goes on, and then that kicked the wheels to rolling. And somebody's like, well, what would it look like if OOIDA had never existed? And then, we started joking around about It's a Wonderful Life and all of that. And it was like, that actually would be really cool to do, because so much of what the association has done over the years has prevented some really heinous things from happening. And it was just, okay, so how do we go about doing this? Because you can get wild and crazy and really throw some outlandish stuff out there. But, when you do these, dystopian type stories, it has to kind of hit close to reality. Just close enough that it's plausible.
Right. Well, and you had mentioned something, too, that I kind of wanted to circle back to. Like, you had mentioned that, the idea of what has OOIDA actually done for me and how it kind of, it rubs you the wrong way. I think that was why I kind of gravitated towards it, is because it is kind of difficult for you to really conceptualize what it is that an advocacy group, that you're not there in Washington. Like, I know that we sent you out to D.C. recently, and I thought it was a really interesting look behind the curtain, right? And so I think that it's understandable. Like, while it can rub you the wrong way, it is understandable that someone would be like, well, I don't understand what you're really doing for me. And it is difficult to kind of see some of that. And so, yeah, it was just an interesting way for me to kind of peel that back and be like, see, this is kind of what they've been doing for you.
Yeah, and that's what you did too, right? I mean, we kind of see this through the lens of Carl, who's kind of the stand-in for George Bailey here. Carl's having a very bad day. There are a number of issues that he runs into throughout this piece that, again, imagine a world in which OOIDA didn't exist, and these issues have come to the forefront. I'm curious, you kind of talked about kind of towing that line between dystopia and reality a little bit. How did you come up with the issues, and what were some of the issues that Carl runs into?
It was interesting, too, because Jamie told me this is one of the few times that we actually get to BS. Like, we get to, I get to make whatever I want up. Like, it's kind of nice. I don't have to fact check anything. But getting ready for the piece, so I wanted
no double sourcing on this one.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to drivers and find out what actual things went down, and just ask them, hey, what was it like before OOIDA really started advocating for a lot of these things? And so I did talk to a lot of guys that were in trucking for years before the association, and they've been either life members or senior members, and they've been in it for a while, so they've definitely seen those efforts come and pay off. But some of the stories they were telling me almost felt like they were making them up too. And I'm like, I couldn't believe this. Like, seriously, this happened. So once I got some of that groundwork and that foundation, it really wasn't hard to kind of, take and run off
and run with it.
Well, and it was fun because we did weave in fact with it, because we went off the Minnesota fatigue checklist for part of this and the Indiana fatigue checklist, which never got litigated because once OOIDA defeated Minnesota on it, Indiana was like, oh, we're not.
Maybe not.
we're not going to do that. But in pulling those old lists, I was like, man, I know one of them had adult reading material on it. And, you know, if you had adult magazines in your bunk, you probably were fatigued. And it was like, I just slid that over to Ryan when I finally found it. And he's like, you've got to be kidding me.
I was tired a lot as a youth, so I guess that checks out. But the other thing that kind of, you know, struck me, and Jamie had mentioned, you know, we talked about like some of the, you know, police harassment and things like that. The other part was some of the stuff is kind of hard to conceptualize in a fictitious moment, right?
Yeah.
And so I think Jamie did an excellent job of really rounding out where we were trying to go with it by bringing up some of the other things that OOIDA has been able to fight for, you know, private right to action and things like that are really, you know, securing truckers' rights to be able to make sure that they're not getting screwed over by people in the industry.
Yeah, when the story initially came through, Ryan did a great job. And by the way, the reason he got assigned that is because he piped up in the meeting and started tossing out ideas. And it was like, there you go.
And if I'm being
you volunteered.
If I'm being honest, I had the movie mistaken for Miracle on 34th Street. So as your guys are all like talking about It's a Wonderful Life, I'm like, I don't remember that.
When can we bring in Santa?
Yeah. When were the bells ringing and the angels getting their wings?
Yeah.
What happened here?
Zuzu? I don't remember her in the original film.
So it took me a while to get my bearings. Once I had it, then I was, got it.
So his story came through, and Mark Schirmer, our senior editor, and I, Ryan was actually on vacation. He turned it loose and left. And we were reading it and was like, oh, this is really good. But do we need to go further?
Yeah.
You know, and it's that fine line between pushing a good thing too far. And we were right there on it because it's crazy enough to read as it is. And to wrap your brain around what's actually going on here. So when it came time for the editor's page, that's where Zuzu's Pedals came back into play, and I could set the stage for how we came up with the idea and the other things. Like we could still have where you had to register in all states, any state that you were going to drive in. You would have the multiple, you know, license plates and the bingo cards. You would
fuel
have
decals. That was
the
one of the
fuel decals. The, you know, different weights for different states. So you would have to route in crazy, crazy ways. And, you know, just kind of started putting these other things together. We probably would have had speed limiters already. We definitely would have had ELDs a long time ago because OIDA defeated that back in the early 2000s in court. So, I mean, there's lots of things that would have happened definitely earlier, if not even more stringent than what we see now. And so I was able to kind of expand it in another piece to augment what Ryan did in his.
Yeah, absolutely. And
highway use fees. Let's not forget about highway use fees.
And again, you know, to that, you mentioned some issues that OIDA is fighting against right now, speed limiters being a huge one. As you said there, without OIDA, we might already see speed limiters, you know, out there.
Well, they've been proposed for decades.
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of these issues that have popped up time and time again are still popping up. And
whack-a-mole.
Bringing it to present day, this is one of these situations where OIDA continues this fight. And if they weren't there, who knows where we would be.
Flip the coin. We keep talking about all the bad stuff. We wouldn't have a restroom access bill. We wouldn't have a bill, you know, hopefully seeking to remove the overtime exemption.
Right.
You wouldn't have the truck parking bill. You know, I mean, there's a lot of good that goes along with this as well. And those are things that OOIDA is fundamentally responsible for.
Also gave me an excellent opportunity to mention the 2 for $50 promo that we're running. So
like
how I wove that into the story. That was good.
Absolutely. If you want to check out that seamless plug there that Ryan mentioned, you can check out the July issue of Landline Magazine. Jamie's editor's page is in there as well, setting the stage for that story and many other great ones in that issue. We encourage everybody to check it out. Jamie, Ryan, always a pleasure, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Scott.
I look forward to it.
Our thanks again to Jamie Jones and Ryan Witkowski. That is our show for today. Landline Now is back tomorrow. We hope to see you then. Take care and drive safe.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
Chrome, and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA. OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit ooida.com.